The first time you hear the siren in this town, you think it's a test. Not a cute little, no worries, just checking the speakers kind of test either. It's a low, wet moan that rolls off the water and into your bones like somebody dragging a giant metal barrel across the seabed. It comes at the same time every night, and it doesn't just tell you what time it is. It tells you what kind of night you're allowed to have. May to August curfew, 9 p.m. September to April curfew, 6 p.m. Every single person follows it. The alive ones do, at least. I'm not saying that for dramatic effect. I'm saying it because I watched the town behave like a switch got flipped. One minute you've got deckhands still smoking on the pier, kids still riding bikes along the seawall, somebody's dog barking at gulls like it's got a job. The next minute, after the siren, everything folds up. Doors shut. Lights go out. Even the damn water seems to go still, like it's listening. When I moved here, I thought it was dumb as hell. Stores closed before curfew. Bars stopped serving before curfew. Even the little bait-and-tackle place with a handwritten sign, cash only, don't ask, pulled down its shutters early. There weren't a lot of reasons to be outside, after curfew anyway. So who was enforcing it? That part was the weirdest. Cop cars would roll through town about 30 minutes before the curfew, slow and patient. They didn't pull anyone over. They didn't bark orders. They offered rides, like they were ferrying people home from a family barbecue. Getting late, they'd call through cracked windows. You need a lift? And if you said no, they'd just keep driving. I never saw them after the siren. Not once. Like even the people enforcing the rule didn't want to be caught outside when the rule actually started. I asked about it the way you ask about an annoying town tradition. Like, hey, why do we do this? Expecting somebody to roll their eyes and say something about teenagers and vandalism. Instead, people got tight. Not angry, not offended, just careful. You could see in their faces the way a fisherman's face changes when he looks at the weather and decides not to launch. No argument, no pride, just a simple practiced fear. I edit videos for a big YouTuber, big enough that my name never mattered and small enough that I could still pretend I was freelancing. My life is a timeline, audio levels, an endless parade of jump cuts and sponsorship reads. As long as I have solid Wi-Fi, I can do my job anywhere. I was burned out. I wanted quiet. I wanted to hear something other than my PC fans and my own thoughts. I found a listing for a place out here, and the pictures looked unreal. Fog rolling between spruce trees, docks lit with sodium lamps, mountains in the distance like the edge of the world. I won't tell you exactly where it is. Not because I think I'm important, but because people on the internet are freaks, and I've learned the hard way what It's Just a Joke looks like when someone's standing in your driveway. But it's on the water. All of it. The town is basically stitched to a bay with old pilings and stubbornness. Everything smells like salt and diesel. Even the laundry you pull out of the dryer has that faint tang of brine, like the ocean got its fingers in the fabric and never let go. There's a Navy presence, too. Not a big base. Nothing with jets screaming overhead, but a fenced-off compound out on the point with warning signs and cameras that follow you if you stare too long. At night, especially in winter, you can hear sonar ping sometimes, faint through the fog, like someone tapping a spoon against a glass deep underwater. People pretend not to notice. You learn pretty quick not to ask what the Navy's listening to. When I learned about the curfew, I shrugged. I lived in cities with worse rules, unofficial ones, the kind enforced by getting stabbed. A town telling you to get inside early? Fine, whatever. I didn't come here to party. The pros outweighed the cons. And then I met Calvin. We met at one of the 2 bars in town. Calling it a bar feels generous. It was a long room with fishing nets nailed to the walls and a floor that always felt like it had been mopped with cheap beer. The bartender's forearms were thick like he'd been wrestling rope his whole life, and the locals drank like they were trying to forget something specific. Calvin wasn't a local, not really. He'd been here 3 years, which in this town is long enough for people to stop calling you new, but not long enough for them to tell you anything real. He was my age, late 20s, scruffy, always smelled faintly like neoprene and machine oil. He worked down at the docks. maintenance on the research boats when they came in, occasional contract work for the Navy guys when something needed a diver who didn't ask questions. We clicked because we both spoke the same language. Dumb games, dumb memes, the kind of humor you develop when you've spent too much time on the internet and not enough time touching grass. Within a few weeks, it became routine. Friday nights. Calvin would come over to my place. Little rental on stilts at the edge of town where you could hear the tide shifting under the floorboards. And we'd smoke on the back steps and play whatever indie co-op game had come out. It was peaceful in a way that made me suspicious. Like the calm you get before a storm, when the air feels too still and the birds shut up. One night, we were halfway through a level, both of us locked in that stupid laser-focused gamer trance, when I finally asked, "Hey, Calvin." His eyes stayed on the screen. What's with the curfew? Like, everybody takes it seriously. Even the cops. He paused just long enough to get our little train in-game blown off the tracks, then sighed like I'd asked him to do taxes. Man, he rubbed his face with the heel of his palm. I don't know. You've been here longer than me. Yeah, and I still don't fucking know. He grabbed a chip, chewed like it had personally insulted him. There's probably a reason. What kind of reason? Calvin's eyes flicked to the window. Not like he saw something, just like the thought made him check. Outside, the bay was black glass. The tide was out. You could smell the mud. He swallowed. People went missing. Like 10 years ago. Couple big ones. Like whole families. They made my skin prickle in that cheap, gossipy way. From the water, Calvin shrugged too hard, like he was trying to shake the topic off. From being dumb. From being out late. From thinking they're tougher than the town. I leaned back, trying to make it make sense. So, it's like bears, but ocean bears. Calvin laughed, quick and uneasy. Yeah, sure, ocean bears. What, seals with knives? Bro, seals would absolutely shank you if they could hold a knife. We laughed. He kept chewing. I kept watching the dark bay beyond my window and telling myself it was just a curfew. That's what I stuck to. Practical reasons. Hypothermia. Drunk fishermen falling off docks. People wandering into the mud flats and getting trapped by the tide. It's not hard to die out here if you're careless. And a town that lives on the water learns to protect itself the way it can. So I followed the curfew. Everybody did. Nobody fought it. It became background noise. The siren, the lights shutting down, the town going dead like a phone with no battery. Over the next year, a couple people went missing the way they say it out here. One guy didn't come back from crabbing. One tourist rented a kayak and never returned it. But that's the ocean. It takes what it wants. Those stories didn't scare me. They fit my theory. Then Calvin came bursting in my house like his hair was on fire. He didn't knock. He didn't text. He just slammed the door open so hard my whole place shuddered on its stilts. "Mark," he shouted, voice raw. "Mark, we were wrong." I was in my bedroom pulling on jeans, getting ready to sit in front of screen for 12 hours. I came out half-dressed and annoyed. Then I saw his face and the annoyance died in my throat. Calvin looked like he'd been dragged behind a boat. Eyes red, skin pale, lips cracked like he'd been breathing salt air all night. His hands shook so hard he could barely close the door behind him. "Wrong about what?" I said, already feeling that cold warning in my gut you get right before bad news. Calvin swallowed, and it looked like it hurt. "We were wrong about it being, accidents." "The curfew," I said. He nodded too fast. "Yeah, it's not people being dumb. It's not the tide. It's not hypothermia. What is it then?" Calvin's eyes snapped to my window. He crossed the room in 3 steps and yanked my curtain shut so hard the ring squealed. "Dude, what the fuck? Just shut up a second," he hissed, voice breaking. He backed away from the window like it could bite him. Then he dropped onto my couch like his legs gave out. I stood there, shirt still in my hands, feeling stupid and naked and suddenly very aware of the damp cold seeping up through my floorboards. Calvin took a breath. Then another. Then another. None of them looked like they helped. "I took an edible last night," he said. I blinked. "Okay." I got hungry. Like stupid hungry. like my body decided it would die if I didn't get sugar immediately. He laughed once, without humor. I wanted a chocolate-coated payday. Specifically, don't ask me why. My brain picked it like it was a fucking mission. You drove? I said, already annoyed. You drove high. It was like 10 minutes to the dock store, he snapped, defensive. And I didn't realize it was past curfew until I got there. The place was closed, all dark. And that's when I thought, okay, fine, I'm an idiot, I'll go home. He rubbed his palms on his jeans like he could wipe the memory off. And as I'm leaving, he continued, slower. I see something in the water. I felt my mouth twist, half amused, half concerned. Calvin, shut up, he said instantly, eyes flashing. Just listen. I shut up. The tide was coming in, he said. So the mud flats were starting to fill. And the dock lights were off because it was after curfew. But the moon was out, right? So you can still see the surface. You can see movement. His gaze kept darting like something was still in my house with us. At first I thought it was seals, he said. They come in sometimes. They follow boats. They like to freak people out. Seals are assholes. I offered, trying to keep it light. Calvin didn't laugh. This wasn't seals. He leaned forward and dropped his voice, not like he was trying to be dramatic, but like he was afraid something would hear him through the walls. It was too smooth, he whispered. Not swimming, not breaching, just moving under the surface like a shadow glued to the water. I felt that cheap thrill again, the one you get when someone starts telling a ghost story. The part of me that wanted to roll my eyes fought with the part of me that didn't like how shaken he looked. And then Calvin said, "It followed me." I stared. "From the dock to your place?" He nodded, eyes wide and wet. "Yeah." "Ow," I said, because it was the only word my brain could pull up. Calvin's lips trembled. Every time I passed one of those street drains, the ones that go down into the bay, I'd hear something like a splash from inside it, like something shifting. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I thought I was being paranoid, he said. I thought it was the edible making me weird. So I told myself not to look. Just drive. Get home. Be inside before the siren. Except the siren had already gone. So I was already fucked, right? He laughed again, sharp and ugly. And then I made the mistake of looking in my mirror, he said. My skin tightened. I saw it in the water beside the road, he whispered. Not behind me, beside me, keeping pace. I couldn't help it. A chuckle slipped out. Calvin's eyes snapped to mine like knives. Don't. I covered my mouth with my hand, but it was too late. The image was ridiculous. Something swimming alongside a road. Matching a car? My brain filed it under stoner paranoia and tried to protect itself by laughing. Calvin, I said, trying to soften it. Buddy, you were high. Like, obviously. It's not funny, Mark, he said, voice cracking. I know what I saw. Okay, I said, hands up. Okay, tell me what you saw. Calvin hesitated. Then he spoke like the words tasted bad. It didn't have eyes, he said. I waited. It had a face, he said, but not like an animal. Like a mask. White. Round. And the dark parts weren't holes. They were like stains. Like the water itself was black in those spots. He swallowed, and it was smiling, not with teeth, just a mouth. A big, empty mouth. I stared at him, and I hate that part of me still wanted to laugh. Not because I thought he was lying, because my brain couldn't make it real. It wanted to keep it in the safe category of Calvin got too high. You sure it wasn't like a buoy? I said, reaching. Or foam. Calvin's jaw clenched. A buoy doesn't keep pace with a car. A buoy doesn't turn when you turn. A buoy doesn't watch you. The word watch landed in the room like a weight. I looked at the closed curtains, suddenly grateful I couldn't see the bay. Calvin stared at his hands. It stayed with me all the way to my driveway, he whispered. And when I ran inside, I heard it under my porch, like it was sloshing around down there, like it was full of water. He shivered so hard his shoulders jumped. I didn't sleep. That's when my laugh died completely, because my porch sloshed sometimes too. Not from waves, I was raised above the tide line. But some nights when the wind was wrong, I'd hear water moving under the house like something shifting in a bucket. I always assumed it was the pilings creaking and the bay answering. Now I wasn't so sure. Still, in the light of day, with Calvin rambling and exhausted and clearly coming down from something, my brain crawled back toward denial like it was a warm bed. I forced a grin. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice friendly. "Okay, you were baked. You saw a spooky seal with a mask. Happens to the best of us." Calvin stared at me like he wanted to hit me. Then, weirdly, he started to laugh. Not happy laughter. The kind you do when you realize you sound insane and you can't stand the fact that you might actually be insane. "Yeah," he said, wiping his eyes. "Yeah, okay, fine. Maybe I'm full of shit." We laughed together for a minute. It felt like relief. Like we'd stuffed the whole thing back into the box labeled Dumb Stoner Story. Calvin's laughter turned into a yawn that nearly swallowed his face. "You haven't slept," I said. "No," he admitted. "Crash here," I said, because it felt safer than letting him go home alone. "Take the couch. Sleep it off. You can go back when you're not like this." Calvin hesitated, then nodded like he didn't have energy to argue. He kicked off his boots, still damp, leaving dark prints on my floor, and collapsed onto my couch. Within minutes, he was out cold. That was the last time I ever saw Calvin. The police came to my house 2 days later. Not the friendly patrol guys with the need a lift routine. These were serious, eyes hard, rain slick on their jackets like they'd been standing in it too long. They asked me when I'd last seen him. I told them. They asked what state he'd been in. I told them the truth. Exhausted, shaken, high. They asked if he'd said anything weird. I hesitated because I knew how it sounded and because the moment I said it out loud, it would become real in a way I didn't want. But I told them anyway. I told them about the dock store, the past curfew drive, the thing in the water. One of the cops, older guy, weathered, didn't react at all. Not surprise, not disbelief. He just nodded once like I'd confirmed something. His partner wrote it down, pen scratching, and for a second, I swear I saw his hand tremble. "Did he mention the siren?" the older cop asked. "What? Did he mention hearing it again?" the cop clarified. I frowned. "No, he just said he was already past curfew." The older cop stared at my closed curtains like he could see through them. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." Then they left, and the space they'd been standing in felt colder. Calvin's house, small rental 2 doors down from mine, went dark and stayed dark. His truck sat in the driveway, slowly collecting salt spray like the town was trying to fossilize it. Sometimes when the wind was wrong, his porch wind chimes would tinkle, and it sounded like someone tapping glass underwater. Weeks floated by in that numb, static way grief does when it's not really grief yet. Just confusion. I wasn't Calvin's family. I wasn't his best friend. We played games and got high and talked shit. But his disappearance stuck in me like a fishhook, because I couldn't shake the image of him on my couch, eyes bloodshot, whispering about something keeping pace in the water. I tried to bury it in work. I edited like a machine. When I wasn't editing, I played games, watched TV, scrolled until my eyes ached. I told myself Calvin probably left town. People do that. People freak out and disappear into the world. But then why would the cops look like that? And why would they ask about the siren? After Calvin vanished, the curfew didn't loosen. If anything, people got stricter. The bar closed even earlier. The dock store stopped staying open 5 minutes extra for late customers. Even a Navy compound out on the point seemed to pull in tighter. More lights, more fencing, more warning signs. And the sonar pings at night, they felt closer. I noticed things I hadn't before. Like how, right before curfew, the waterbirds left. Not gradually like normal, all at once. Like somebody clapped their hands and dismissed them. Like how the bay would sometimes get wrong. Not rough, not stormy, just wrong. The surface would ripple in a pattern that didn't match the wind, like something huge rolled beneath it, slow and patient, rearranging the water from below. Like how sometimes, when the siren wailed, the fog would thicken immediately, swallowing the streetlights like it was hungry. I started paying attention to my gas gauge the way you pay attention to a timer when something's in the oven. Not because I cared about fuel, because I didn't want to be stranded outside after curfew. And then, because life loves irony, I got stranded anyway. It was mid-July, peak long light season. The days out here feel endless, like the sun forgets it's supposed to set. I just finished a video and sent it off, the kind of edit where your brain turns to sludge. I realized my fridge was empty except for a half bottle of hot sauce and a jar of pickles. I checked the time, 7:30. Plenty of time, I told myself. The dock store was a 15-minute drive. If I left now, I'd be back with groceries well before the 9 p.m. curfew. I could have walked, technically. The town is small, but you don't walk out here unless you have to. Not because it's dangerous during the day, because the ground itself is a trap. Mud flats, slick rocks, uneven planks, docks that shift under your feet. One misstep and you're in freezing water, and even in July, that bay bites. So I drove. As I pulled out, I passed Calvin's place. Same dark windows, same truck, a gull perched on his roof like it owned him now. I felt that familiar twist in my stomach, like my body was reminding me, hey, don't forget, the road to town hugged the bay. On one side, spruce trees and wet grass. On the other, water, gray and endless, breathing against the rocks. The sun was low, throwing red light across the surface like spilled oil. The air tasted metallic like pennies. I rolled down my window and got hit with the smell of kelp and diesel and something faintly rotten, fish guts, maybe normal for here. I grabbade groceries fast, bread, cheese, butter. Plans for a grilled cheese and some mindless game to wash the day out of my head. I didn't linger. I didn't chat. I didn't even look at the water through the dock store's back windows. When I got back in my car, I made it about 10 minutes before it sputtered. At first, I thought I'd hit a bad patch of road. Then the engine coughed again like it was choking. The steering got heavy. Then the car just died. I coasted onto the shoulder, heart already lifting into panic. I looked down. My gas gauge was below empty. I just stared at it like it was lying to me. Like, no, that's not possible, I would have noticed. But I hadn't, because I'm an idiot. Because my life happens on a screen, not in the real world where things like fuel matter. Fuck, I said loud to the empty car. The sun was almost gone. The sky was turning that bruised purple that means the fog is coming. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Of course. I popped my trunk and found the jerrycan I kept for her. I don't know. The idea of emergencies. It was empty. My hands felt clumsy, suddenly sweaty, even in the cold air. The nearest gas station was back in town. The same dock store. The same place that would lock up before curfew and go dark. I checked my watch. 8:12. I could make it, I told myself. I could walk fast, fill the can, get back, pour it in, drive home. No big deal. Just don't be out after curfew. That last part tightened my throat. I started walking. The road felt longer on foot. The bay was beside me the whole time, whispering against rocks. Fog crawled in low, dampening sound. My shoes got wet from the grass on the shoulder, and every step made that soft squelch like I was walking on logs. The farther I walked, the more the town behind me disappeared. The streetlights ahead blurred into halos. The air got colder, and I could taste salt at the back of my tongue. At 8:45, I saw the gas station lights. Relief hit me so hard my knees actually wobbled. I jogged the last stretch, jerrycan banging against my leg, breath steaming. The dock store owner was locking up. Same guy as always. White beard, stained hoodie, eyes like he'd seen too many storms. He glanced at my watch, then at the sky. "You're my last customer," he said flatly. I know, I panted. Car died. I just need fuel. His expression didn't soften. "Fill it, then go." "I will," I promised. He didn't say anything else. He just watched me like he was counting down seconds in his head. I filled the jerry can until it sloshed near the top. The smell of gasoline cut through the brine like a knife. My hand shook a little as I screwed the cap on. "Thank you," I said. The owner nodded once, already turning away, keys in hand. As he walked toward the store, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. "Don't stop," he said. "What?" "On the way." he clarified, eyes hard. Don't stop. Don't look. Don't. He stopped himself like he'd almost said too much. Then he pointed down the road. Just go. A chill ran up my spine that had nothing to do with the wind. Yeah, I said, voice thin. Okay. He locked the store and disappeared inside. The lights went off. I was alone under a sky that was turning black. I started back. At first it was fine. Just me and my footsteps in the bay. I kept my phone flashlight pointed at the road, more for comfort than vision. Fog brushed my face like damp hands. The jerrycan felt heavier with every minute, the handle digging into my palm. I watched the time tick toward 9 p.m. like it was a bomb. 8:57, 8:58. The siren usually came from the tower by the harbor. Some nights you could feel it through your ribs. At 8:59, I was still walking. I started swearing under my breath, not like it helped, but like saying the words could push my legs faster. Then the siren sounded. It rolled out over the fog, long and low, and I swear the water beside the road changed. Not visually, not in some obvious Hollywood way. Just the sound of it shifted. The bay got quieter like it stopped breathing. My mouth went dry. I kept walking. I didn't want to run. Running on that road in fog with a full jerrycan felt like a good way to eat shit and spill fuel everywhere. I forced myself to keep a steady pace, even though panic was chewing at the inside of my ribs. 10 minutes into the walk, I realized something. I hadn't seen a single patrol car. No headlights, no slow rolling, no need to lift, nothing. That should have made me feel better, less likely to get chewed out for being out late. Instead, it made me feel exposed, like the cops weren't out because they couldn't help me anymore. The fog thickened. My flashlight beam turned into a useless white cone. Sound got weird, muffled, and close at the same time. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was the bay. Waves slapping rocks. Normal. Then it came again, sharp, rhythmic. Clop, clop, clop. I stopped walking without meaning to, breath caught. The sound stopped too. For a second, the only noise was my own breathing and the faint, patient hush of the water. I started walking again, faster now, adrenaline pouring through my muscles. The sound returned. Clop, clop, clop. Except not hooves. It was bare feet. Wet feet slapping on something hard. Running. Coming from behind me. Growing louder. I didn't look back. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me remembered the store owner's warning. Maybe because Calvin's voice whispered in my head. It followed me. The slap, slap, slap got closer fast. My brain screamed at my body to move. I broke into a run. The jerrycan swung wildly, gasoline sloshing inside like a living thing. My shoes slipped once, and I nearly went down, catching myself at the last second. The footsteps were still behind me. Not gaining, not falling back, matching, like whatever it was knew exactly how fast I could go. My throat burned. My lungs felt tight. Fog filled my nose with cold water taste. I saw my car's silhouette ahead, a darker shape in the gray. Relief hit me like a punch. I sprinted the last stretch, stumbled to my driver's door, fumbled the keys so badly I wanted to cry. The slapping footsteps were right there now, so close I could hear water dripping off whatever was making them. I got the key in. I yanked the door open. Something exhaled behind me. Not breath like a person, like air bubbling up through water. I threw myself into the car, slammed the door, locked it so hard my thumb hurt. I didn't even pour the gas in. I didn't even think. I turned the key. The engine tried, coughed, failed. Come on, I whispered, voice shaking. Come on, come on. I turned it again. The engine sputtered, caught, then died. The car was empty. I'd only brought fuel, not magic. Outside, the slapping footsteps stopped. Silence. My hands were glued to the steering wheel. My heartbeat was so loud it felt like it filled the whole cabin. Something touched the outside of my passenger window. Not a tap, a press, like a palm laid flat against the glass. My whole body went rigid. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me not to, I turned my head. It was there, inches from my face, right outside my passenger window, keeping itself level with me, without effort, like it belonged there. Its head was a perfect white circle, too clean in the fog like porcelain. 2 black spots sat where I should be, but they weren't holes. They were stains, smeared into the white like ink bleeding in paper. Below them was a mouth, one big, dark oval, slightly open like it was smiling without understanding what smiling meant. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just watched. Its body was wrong, thin and pale, more like a stretched piece of wet cloth and flesh. Where shoulders should be, it narrowed into nothing. It had limbs, I think, long jointed shapes pressed close to the car, but the fog and my terror made it hard to track. Its head stayed perfectly still the whole time, like a camera on a gimbal, locked onto me. And the worst part? It wasn't standing on the ground. It was moving on the shoulder beside my car, but not like something running. It kind of slid, like water was holding it up, like it was half in a different place, a place where friction didn't exist. I could see rocks and scrub grass between us, and it didn't disturb any of it. No crunch, no snap, no esplas, just that face. My brain tried to make sense of it. It grabbed at anything, seal, diver mask, prank, hallucination, but it was too close, too intentional. It lifted one long, pale hand, if you can call it a hand, and pressed it to the glass again. The glass fogged instantly where it touched. Not from heat, from cold. My breath hitched. My mouth tasted like metal. Fuck, I whispered, barely audible. The thing's mouth opened a fraction wider. Not like it understood the word, like it understood the fear behind it. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't just sit in an empty car while something stared at me like I was food. My hand shook as I grabbed the jerry can. I forced myself to look away from the window long enough to pop the hood latch and climb out. The fog swallowed me the moment I stepped outside. The air felt wet and heavy. The thing didn't move. It stayed right there by the passenger window, face angled toward where my head had been. I moved fast, not graceful, pure panic muscle memory. I popped the fuel door, poured gas, so hard some splashed on my shoes, the fumes burning my nose. My fingers slipped on the cap as I screwed it back on. I expected it to grab me, to yank me, to pull me into the fog. It didn't. I slid back into the driver's seat, slammed the door, locked it, hands flying to the ignition. The engine turned, coughed, caught. I floored the pedal like an idiot. The car lurched forward, tires spitting gravel. For a second I thought, hope surged stupidly, that I'd left it behind. Then I glanced right. It was still there, keeping pace, right beside my passenger window again, face steady, black stains fixed on me. The road here is narrow and ugly, squeezed between bay and brush. The shoulder drops off into rocks and tide pools. In the fog, the edge disappears. Driving fast on it is how you end up in the water. But slowing down felt like dying. I drove with my teeth clenched, so hard my jaw ached. My eyes stayed on the road, but I could feel it there like a weight on my skin. Every time I stole a glance, it was unchanged. Same expressionless smile, same still head, same impossible glide over rocks and roots like they weren't there. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit it. I wanted to do anything that made me feel like I wasn't helpless. Instead, I drove. My driveway finally appeared out of the fog like a miracle. The shape of my stilt house, the dark outline of my porch, the bay breathing beneath it. I yanked the wheel and pulled in hard enough that my tires hit the edge of the gravel. I threw the car in a park, locked the doors again like that would matter, and killed the engine. The silence after the engine stopped felt like getting dunked underwater. The thing stayed at my passenger window. For several long seconds, it didn't do anything. Neither did I. We just sat there, separated by glass and fear. Then I watched its head begin to lower, not like it crouched, like it sank. Slowly, smoothly, out of sight below the window line. My chest tightened. I leaned forward, trying to see where it went, but all I saw was fog and the dark shape of my porch steps. And then it made a sound. A deep, empty, sloshing sound, like liquid shifting inside a massive metal can. The sound came from beneath my house, beneath the porch, beneath the place where the tide pushed in and out. I froze so hard my muscles started to ache. The sloshing continued, slow and deliberate, like something repositioning itself under the floorboards. Then, softly, there came a knock. Not on my car, on the underside of my porch. 1, 2, 3. Each one spaced out, patient like whoever was knocking knew I couldn't do anything about it. I stayed in my car. I don't know how long. Hours. My phone was dead from the flashlight and no signal. The fog pressed against the windows like wet wool. Every so often, I'd hear the slosh shift, and another knock would follow, as if it was testing different spots. At some point, water began dripping onto my hood. But it wasn't raining. It was dripping from above, from the boards of my porch, like something was crawling along them. My mouth went dry. I forced myself not to look up. I forced myself not to imagine that white face peering down through the gaps. I sat there until my eyes burned, until my hands cramped around the steering wheel, until fear became so constant it stopped feeling sharp and started feeling like sickness. Just before dawn, the sloshing faded. The drip stopped. The fog thinned enough for the horizon to show a faint gray line. Birds began calling, tentative at first, then louder, like they were checking if it was safe. I waited longer anyway, because daylight doesn't always mean safety out here. Daylight just means you can see what's killing you. When I finally worked up the nerve, I leaned toward the passenger window and looked down. Nothing. No parallelims. No white circle. Just the damp rocks under my porch and a tide line creeping in. I opened my door slowly, ready to slam it shut at the first sign of movement. The cold air hit my face like a slap. The world smelled clean in that early morning way, salt, wet with distant fish. Nothing moved. I practically crawled out of the car and stumbled up my porch steps, keys clenched in my fist like a weapon. My floorboards creaked under me, and every creak sounded like a scream. Inside, my house smelled like stale weed and electronics and the faint moldy damp that never really leaves coastal places. I locked the door, then locked it again, then stood there with my back against it like a cartoon. My body finally remembered exhaustion existed. I collapsed in a bed, still wearing my clothes. I didn't even take my shoes off. I didn't want to. I wanted to keep the idea of running attached to my feet. Sleep took me like a wave. When I woke up, it was dark again. For a split second, I didn't know where I was. My room was black. The air was cold. My mouth tasted like pennies. Then I heard it. The bay, right under my floor. Slow and steady. Breathing. I fumbled for my phone. The screen lit up my room with harsh blue. 9 o'clock. Exactly. My heart started doing that stupid thing again, thumping too hard, too fast, like it wanted to escape my chest. Curfew had started. I sat up slowly, listening. No siren. It must have gone while I was asleep. No knocks. No esrosing. Just the water. I swung my legs off the bed, joints stiff, and forced myself to stand. My whole body felt sore, like I'd been clenching every muscle for hours. I told myself it was over. I told myself daylight had chased it off, and night hadn't brought it back. I told myself I'd imagined it. I told myself a lot of bullshit. I walked toward my office, then stopped. A morbid curiosity pulled me toward the window that faced my driveway. I didn't want to look. I had to look. I eased the curtain aside with 2 fingers. My car sat where I'd left it, crooked in the gravel. The porch post stood dark against the fogless night. The tide was in now, water lapping close under my house. For a second, I saw nothing, and relief hit me so hard my vision blurred. Then my eyes adjusted. Under my car, under the shadow of it, where the gravel met damp earth, something pale was curled up like it had been waiting all day. Its thin body was pressed almost flat to the ground, and its face, white circle, black stains, empty mouth, was turned toward my window, looking straight at me. I didn't move. That's the thing people don't tell you about fear. It isn't always screaming and sprinting and heroic bullshit. Sometimes it's just you standing there with 2 fingers on a curtain, staring at something that shouldn't be able to hold a gaze like that, and your body deciding it's safer to become furniture. Under my car, it didn't look like it was crouching. It looked like it had poured itself into the shadow, like it was using the dark as cover the way an octopus uses a rock. The face was the same, white circle, black stains where eyes should be, that empty mouth like a cutout. But now that I was looking at it through glass in my own house, with the water beneath me whispering, I noticed something I hadn't last night. It was wet in a way that wasn't rain wet. It glistened like it had just surfaced, like it had crawled out of somewhere deep and cold and pressurized, and it still carried that slick sheen of not this world water. My mouth opened and nothing came out. The thing didn't move. It didn't need to. It knew I'd found it. It knew exactly where I was. I let the curtain fall back into place like it weighed 100 pounds. The rest of the house felt too quiet. Even the fridge hum sounded like it was trying not to draw attention. I backed away from the window and stood in the middle of my living room, arms hanging at my sides, mind spinning in circles. Okay. What do you do when something is under your car, watching you from the dark, and your town has a fucking curfew like it's the purge? Call the cops? I pull my phone up, thumb hovering over the screen. No signal. Still, of course. My Wi-Fi was up, router lights blinking like nothing in the world had changed, but cell service was dead. It wasn't always dead. During the day, I could get enough bars to load a page, make a call if I stood near the porch. Now, nothing. Like the night had eaten it. I paced. 2 steps. 3. Turn. 2 steps. 3. I thought about grabbing a knife. Anything. Then I picture myself stepping outside with a kitchen knife like a guy in a slasher movie, and the thought made bile rise in my throat. The thing kept pace with my car. It pressed cold into my window. It sloshed under my porch. A knife would do what exactly? Annoy it? My eyes kept flicking to the ceiling, to the floorboards, like it might suddenly be inside. Like it might drip through the seams the way water does when a roof leaks. The bay beneath my house made that slow, steady shushing sound, and every time the water shifted, I heard Calvin's voice, sloshing around down there. I couldn't stay in the living room. The openness felt wrong, like I was exposed. I moved through my house, turning lights off as I went, not because I thought darkness would help me, but because it felt like the thing outside might be drawn to lit windows the way bugs are. In my bedroom, I shut the door and locked it, even though it was a cheap interior lock that wouldn't stop a determined toddler. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened. Water. Pipes. The occasional creak of the house settling on its stilts. Then, so faint I thought I imagined it, something scraped under my car. A slow drag, like a wet palm sliding across gravel. I held my breath until my vision started to sparkle. Another scrape, then a sound that made my skin crawl off my bones. A soft, steady tap from outside my bedroom wall, not on the window, lower than that, like something tapping the underside of the house, traveling along the beams. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't aggressive. It was patient. It was counting. I don't know how long I stayed like that, staring at my bedroom door like it might swing open and show me a white face. At some point, I realized my hands were clenched so tight my nails had cut little half moons into my palms. I forced myself to breathe quietly, in through the nose, out through the mouth, like I was trying not to spook an animal. The tapping moved, not closer to my bedroom, away, toward the front of the house, toward the porch, toward the steps. Then it stopped. Silence settled. I sat there in that silence until my body started to shake from adrenaline and exhaustion. At some point, sometime after midnight, I think, I heard a new sound, a distant ping, not loud, not close, but unmistakable. That same sonar-like pulse I'd heard on winter nights, faint through fog, like something tapping a spoon against a glass far underwater. Ping. Pause. Ping. The hair on my arms rose. Then another sound joined it, softer, like a whisper woven through the ping. A low, rhythmic thump that reminded me of a ship's hull being tested by pressure. Knock. 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 It wasn't coming from my house anymore. It was coming from the bay, My brain did something awful. It pictured the thing under my car, turning its face toward the water, listening like a dog hearing a whistle only it can hear. Then it pictured it answering. I don't remember falling asleep, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to a thin gray light and the sound of gulls yelling like they had opinions. Morning didn't feel like safety. It felt like a pause. I lay in bed, listening. No tapping, no esbrosing, just water and birds and the distant clank of rigging down at the docks as boats started their day. My phone had a bar now. One pathetic little bar that flickered like it might die if I looked at it wrong. I didn't call the cops. I called Calvin, straight to voicemail, like it had every time I tried since he disappeared. I sat there staring at his name on my screen like if I stared long enough, it would change into something else. Then I got up, slow and stiff, and walked to the window. My driveway was empty. No pale body under my car. No white circle face. My car sat alone in the gravel like a normal, stupid object. I waited for relief and didn't get it. Because the absence didn't mean it was gone. It meant it was somewhere else. I forced myself outside anyway. The air was cold in that coastal morning way. Sun out, but dampness living in everything. My porch boards were slick. The railing felt clammy under my hand. I walked to my car and crouched, heart punching my ribs, and looked underneath. Nothing, just shadow and the underside of my chassis. I stood up too fast and got dizzy. I did a full circle in my driveway, scanning the brush, the water line, the space under the porch. Nothing. It felt like being watched anyway, like the air itself had eyes. I went inside and made coffee I didn't drink. I stood at my sink, staring at the bay through the kitchen window, waiting for the water to do something wrong. When it didn't, my brain tried to drag me back into denial. It tried to say nightmare, sleep deprivation, panic. Then I noticed something on my passenger window, a perfect oval smear, like a wet mouth had pressed against the glass. It wasn't condensation. The rest of the window was clean. Just that mark, right where the mouth had been. My stomach dropped. I wiped it with my finger. It didn't smear like water. It smeared like oil. I scrubbed at it until my fingertip hurt, until the glass squeaked. It faded but didn't fully disappear. Like a stain, like those black spots on its face. I didn't stay home that day. I couldn't. Being in my house felt like sitting inside a trap you watch somebody else get caught in. I drove into town in broad daylight. And for the first time since moving here, I felt like I was moving through a set that had been built to look normal. People smiled at me on the sidewalk. A guy waved from a fishing boat. The bar's neon sign blinked lazily in the window, like it always did. But everybody's eyes were careful, not panicked, not suspicious, just alert, like prey animals pretending to be relaxed. I went straight to the police station. Not a big building, just a squat little place with peeling paint, perched on a rise above the harbor like it wanted a good view of what came in. Inside, it smelled like wet wool and old coffee. A bored-looking receptionist glanced up. "Can I help you?" "I need to talk to someone," I said, voice hoarse. "About last night." Her expression changed, not to concern, to something more resigned. "Name?" I told her. She didn't write it down. She just nodded toward a bench. "Seed." "E set." My knee bounced so hard the whole bench vibrated. After a few minutes, the older cop, the one who'd come about Calvin, stepped out of the back room. He looked more tired than before, like he hadn't slept in years. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't offer coffee. He just said, "You were out past curfew." I ran out of gas. I snapped, anger flaring because it was easier than fear. I was walking back with fuel, and something chased me. His eyes didn't widen. He didn't act surprised. He just nodded once. "What did it look like?" he asked. My mouth went dry again. Like a person, kind of, but not. White face, no eyes, black spots, mouth like a cutout. He exhaled through his nose like he'd been holding that breath all night. "Did it touch you?" "No," I said quickly. "No, it just watched. It followed me. It was under my car last night. I saw it through my window." "Under your car," he repeated very softly, and the hairs on my neck stood up because his tone wasn't disbelief. It was recognition. Is this what happened to Calvin? I demanded. His jaw tightened. We don't know what happened to Calvin. Bullshit, I said louder than I meant to. A couple people in the waiting area glanced over. You asked me about the siren. You wrote down what I said like it mattered. The cop's eyes flicked to them, then back to me. Come on, he said. He led me into a small office that smelled like mildew and paper. He shut the door. Sit, he said again, and I sat again, hands clenched together like I could crush my own fingers and stop shaking. He leaned against his desk, arms folded. You moved here a few years ago, he said. You work from home. You don't have family here. Yeah, I said, suspicious. Which means you haven't had the talk, he said. The talk, I repeated, hearing how ridiculous it sounded. He stared at me like he was weighing something. Then, very carefully, he said, Do you know why this town exists where it exists? It's a harbor, I said. Fishing, Navy contracts, research boats. He almost smiled. Almost. That's what it is on the surface, he said. The way he said, surface, made my stomach twist. What is it underneath? I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer directly. He walked to the window and looked out at the bay. It was calm, blue-gray, dotted with boats. 10 years ago, he said, we had a string of disappearances. Not drownings, not boating accidents. People on land, people in homes, whole families. Calvin's words echoed. Whole families. We called in the state, the cop continued. Then the Coast Guard. Then other people. The Navy, I said. His eyes flicked to me. Yeah. What did they find? I asked, voice low. He stayed quiet long enough that my heartbeat filled the room. Then he said, There's an installation out there, like a base. I asked. No, he said. Not on land. My mouth went numb. Underwater, he didn't deny it. That was enough. I felt suddenly, violently nauseous, like my body had understood before my brain. There's a station, I whispered. He rubbed his face. They call it a listening post. Listening to what? He stared at the bay again, and when he spoke, his voice was flat. Things that shouldn't be there, he said. I laughed once, sharp and broken. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got, he said. I leaned forward. What is the thing that followed me? The cop's jaw worked like he was chewing something unpleasant. We call them walkers. That's stupid, I said, because I needed to fight something. It is, he agreed. But it's what people call them because he stopped himself, then finished anyway. Because they walk where water should stop them. I pictured the thing gliding over rocks without making sound, like the world had different rules for it. Why at night? I asked. He shrugged, small. We think they can't hold themselves together in daylight, or they don't like being seen, or it's tied to tides. I don't know. You don't know? I repeated, bitter. So you just tell everyone to go inside early and hope for the best. We tell everyone to go inside, he corrected, because it works. I wanted to argue, but the memory of that face inches from my own shut me up. Calvin said he heard sloshing under his porch. I said, voice shaking. He said it followed him from drains. The cop nodded slowly. They use water, he said. Use it how? He looked at me like I was asking how a shark swims. It's not just the bay, he said. It's any connection. Storm drains, culverts, pipes, wet ground. They don't need deep water. They need a path. I thought my house on stilts, water literally under it. Oh my God, I whispered. The cop's eyes softened a fraction. Yeah, he said quietly. Now you get it. Why didn't anyone tell me? I snapped, anger flaring again because it was easier than panic. Why didn't Calvin tell me? People don't talk about it, the cop said. Not out loud. Not directly. You don't feed fear, you understand? Fear makes people do dumb shit. So you just let new people move in and, what? Roll the dice. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I stood up so fast my chair scraped. I'm leaving, I said. The cop's expression didn't change. Today, right now, I said, I'm packing my car and I'm driving until I see mountains or desert or literally anything that isn't water. His gaze held mine. And when the road runs along the bay, he asked. I'll drive fast, I said. And when you hit a stretch of road with culverts and drains, he pressed. Oh, my voice caught. He let the silence sit, then said, "They don't like you leaving." I stared. What the hell does that mean? He rubbed his jaw. It means, he said slowly, that the ones who see them and live, they tend to see them again. My skin went cold all over. So I marked. He didn't confirm it, but his eyes did. I swallowed hard. Then what do? He sighed like the question hurt. You follow the curfew, he said. You stay away from water at night. You keep your windows covered. You don't go looking. And if you hear the siren again, if you hear it outside, the normal time, his voice dropped. You get inside and you don't open the door for anything. My throat tightened. There's another siren. He hesitated. Sometimes, he admitted, sometimes it changes. Sometimes it's closer. I thought of the pinging last night, the way the bay had sounded like a hull being knocked from below. What about the Navy? I asked. If they got a station, if they're listening, if they know, why isn't it fixed? He laughed, humorless. Fixed, he echoed. You ever try to fix the ocean? I left the station with my head full of static. The town looked the same. People walked dogs. A kid rode a bike. Someone hauled a cooler onto a boat. And beneath all of it, there was this sense of a lid clamped down hard, like everyone was living with a secret that would crack them open if they spoke it. I went straight to the dock store and bought what I needed like I was prepping for a storm. Bottled water, canned food, batteries, flashlights, duct tape. I grabbed blackout curtains without thinking. The cashier didn't ask questions. He rang it up with the expression of someone watching you put a bandage on a wound he knows is infected. I drove home with my hands locked on the wheel. Every storm drain I passed made my chest tighten. Every puddle in the ditch looked like a mouth. Back at my place, I worked like a maniac. I replaced my thin curtains with blackout ones. I shoved towels along the bottom of doors like I was trying to keep smoke out. I taped over the little windows in my front door. It felt stupid in daylight. It felt less stupid when I looked at my passenger window and saw that oval mouth stain still faintly there like a bruise. Around noon, I went into my house. I don't know why. Curiosity, self-destruction, the need to see something with my own eyes that wasn't filtered through fear. I crouched in the damp sand under the porch, the smell of salt and rotting seaweed thick in my nose. The tide was low. The mud was exposed, glistening. I expected to find, I don't know, footprints, claw marks, anything. What I found was worse because it was subtle. On one of my porch beams, there were 3 wet handprints. Long, narrow prints like a human hand stretched too far. And between them, faint black smears like someone had dragged ink across the wood. I stared at those marks until my eyes watered. Then I heard something, a ping, faint, distant like last night. I froze. The sound didn't come from the open bay. It came from deeper, farther out toward the Navy compound point. Ping. Pause. Ping. My skin crawled. I crawled out from under my house and stood up too fast, head bumping the porch boards. Pain flashed and I barely felt it. I went inside and locked the door like it meant anything. The rest of the day crawled. I tried to work. I couldn't. Every time a video-audio track dipped into silence, my brain filled it with sloshing. At 5 p.m., I tried to call a moving company. I tried to look up rentals inland. I tried to plan escape routes. It all felt ridiculous because every plan involved driving along water. This town wasn't just on the water. It was wrapped in it. Every road out curled along the bay, crossed bridges, ran beside canals. Like the town had been built with the assumption you couldn't leave without touching the ocean's edge. At 7:30, I made myself eat something and tasted nothing. At 8 o'clock, I started pacing again. At 8:30, I double-checked locks like a man checking his pulse. At 8:50, the whole town seemed to inhale. Then the sirens sounded. Long, low. Vet. It rolled through my house even with the curtains closed, vibrating in the glass. My phone immediately dropped to no signal again, like the night flipped a switch. I sat in the dark living room, one flashlight in my lap, another on the table, listening. Water under my porch. Pipes in my walls. My own breathing. At 9:10, I heard the first knock. Not on my door. From beneath me. 1, 2, 3. I froze. Pause. 1, 2, 3. It wasn't random. It was the same pattern as last night. Like it had learned my house. Or like it was repeating a ritual. I clicked my flashlight on and aimed it at the floor like an idiot. As if light could punch through wood and fear. The knocking moved. Slower now. Along the beams. Toward the center of the house. Then, so softly I felt it more than heard it. There was a wet scrape under the floorboards. Like something sliding its weight across mud. My throat tightened. My eyes stung. My body shook, and I couldn't stop it. Then came the sloshing. Deep. Hollow. Like liquid shifting inside something big and empty. Under my living room. Right under where I was sitting. The floorboard beneath my feet creaked. Not from house settling, but from pressure. From weight. Something pressed up. Not enough to break through. Enough to tell me it could. I clapped a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The sloshing paused. The knocking stopped. Silence settled, thick and listening. And then a voice, if you can call it that, whispered. Not words. Not language. A wet, bubbling mimic of human sound. Like someone trying to talk with a mouth full of seawater. My blood turned to ice. Because it sounded like someone saying my name. Ma ericapa. It wasn't right. The syllable dragged. It gurgled at the end. But it was close enough that my brain tried to recognize it. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears hot and humiliating. No, y whispered. No, no, no. Silence. Then again, closer. Ma ericapa. I wanted to run to my bedroom and lock myself in. I wanted to curl up and disappear. But moving felt like announcing myself. So I stayed still. The voice shifted. Different pitch now. Rougher. And my whole body seized when I recognized it. It sounded like Calvin. Not like a perfect impression. Like someone had heard Calvin speak once, and then tried to reproduce it through water. Ma, RK, it said again, and the last sound bubbled into laughter. I bit down on my own knuckle so hard it hurt. Under my floor, something moved, slow and heavy, and I could feel vibrations through the boards. Then it went still, like it was waiting for me to answer. I sat there in the dark, tasting blood, listening to my own heartbeat slam against my ribs. I thought about the cop's warning. Don't open the door for anything. This wasn't the door. This was the floor. Then the pinging started again, faint at first, then steady. Ping. Pause. Ping. It felt like it was coming from under my house now, like the water beneath me was a conduit. With each ping, the sloshing under the floor shifted in response, like it was listening to instructions. Then from far out in the bay, there came a deeper sound, a low, rolling groan. Not thunder, not a boat engine, a sound like something massive moving under pressure. My stomach lurched, my skin prickled. The pings sped up. Ping, ping, ping. The sloshing under my floor grew louder, agitated like liquid being shaken in a drum. The floorboard beneath my feet lifted a fraction of an inch. I felt it. I swear to God, I felt the board rise. A crack appeared between two planks, thin as a hairline. From that crack, cold air seeped up, air that smelled like deep water and rust. And then, in that crack, something black shimmered. Not a shape, a stain, a darkness that looked wet. It spread along the seam like ink through paper. My body finally snapped. I surged to my feet, grabbing the flashlight, stumbling backward. The floor creaked again, heavier now, like something pressing up harder. The crack widened a fraction. A wet sound came through it, like a mouth opening underwater. I backed toward my hallway, legs shaking so hard I nearly fell. And then, from the crack, came that voice again. Calvin's almost voice. Come out. I ran. Not outside. I wasn't that stupid. I ran to my bedroom and slammed the door, locked it, shoved my dresser in front of it like I was in a fucking zombie movie. My hands were slick with sweat. My breath came in ragged gasps. I sat on my bedroom floor with my back against the bed, flashlight pointed at the door. I listened. The knocking had stopped. The sloshing had moved away, toward the living room again. Then the pings went quiet too, like whatever signal was controlling it had ended. I sat there for hours, every muscle locked. At some point, I heard water drip, not from my ceiling, from my bedroom closet, a soft, steady plink like a faucet. I stared at my closet door until my eyes burned. The dripping continued. Plink, plink, plink. I didn't have a leak. I never had. My roof was fine. My pipes were fine. My closet wasn't connected to anything wet. The dripping got faster. Plink, plink, plink. Then stopped. Silence. I held my breath. A wet scraping sound came from inside the closet, like something shifting against wood. I shook my head hard like I could dislodge the thought. No, you whispered. No. The closet door handle twitched. Just once. A small, precise movement. My whole body went cold. It twitched again, stronger. Then the door moved a fraction of an inch, as if pressure from inside was testing it. I screamed. Not a cool scream. Not a movie scream. A raw, animal noise that tore out of me because my body couldn't hold it in. I grabbed my flashlight like a club and stumbled backward until my shoulder hit the wall. The closet door stopped moving. Silence. Then, softly, came that bubbling voice right on the other side of thin wood. Ma ericapa. I slammed the flashlight beam on the crack onto the closet door. Something wet and pale was pressed there. Not a foot, not a hand. A smooth, thin shape like flesh without bone. It slid away when the light hit it, fast. The dripping started again. Plink, plink, plink. I don't know how I stayed conscious. I don't know how I didn't piss myself. Maybe I did. I honestly can't remember. When dawn finally came, when the bird started up and the light turned the edges of my curtains gray, the dripping stopped. The closet went still. The house settled with its normal, innocent creaks like it hadn't tried to fucking hatch something in the night. I waited another hour anyway. Then, shaking, I shoved my dresser back, unlocked my door, and stepped into the hallway. The living room floor looked normal. No cracks, no black stains, no wet seams. I walked to the closet and stood there staring at it for a full minute before I worked up the nerve to yank it open. It was empty. No puzzles, no wet clothes, no smell, just coats and boxes and the faint dusty odor of cardboard. I stood there breathing hard, feeling insane. Then I saw the back wall of the closet. 3 long, narrow, wet handprints, and beneath them, faint black smears. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I'd pass out. It had been in there. It had been in my bedroom, and my stupid little interior lock hadn't meant shit. I didn't go to the police again. What would I say? Hey, the ocean monster is in my closet. I didn't go to the Navy compound because you don't just stroll up to fences with warning signs and ask to speak to whoever's in charge of underwater nightmares. I did the only thing I could think of. I tried to leave. I packed my car like I was evacuating a hurricane. Clothes, laptop, hard drives, important documents. I didn't care about furniture. I didn't care about dishes. I didn't care about anything except getting away from water. Which is funny because if you've lived on the coast, you know how impossible that sounds. Everything has water in it. Even you. I left around noon, when the sun was high and the bay looked harmless. I drove with my jaw clenched, eyes flicking constantly to storm drains, culverts, ditches. Every time I crossed a small bridge, my hands went numb on the wheel. The road out of town wound along the shoreline for miles before it finally turned inland, climbing through wet forest. I kept telling myself, just get to the turn, just get to the climb, just get away from a bay. At first, nothing happened. The farther I drove, the lighter my chest felt. The air started smelling less like brine and more like pine. The road rose. The water fell away behind me. For a moment, I actually believed I'd outrun it. Then my radio crackled. Not static, not bad reception. A clear, sharp sound like someone tapping a microphone. Then a faint ping. Ping. My stomach clenched. I turned the radio off. The car went silent except for tires on asphalt. My phone still had signal. 3 bars. Normal. My hand stopped shaking a fraction. Then from the back seat, I heard a drip. Plink. I froze so hard the car drifted a little in the lane. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The back seat was empty except for my duffel bag and a pile of blankets. Plink. My throat tightened. No, I said out loud, voice thin. Plink. I kept driving. Faster now. I told myself it was condensation. A water bottle. Something stupid. Then I smelled it. Deep water. That cold, rusty, seaweed and metal smell that had seeped through my floorboards last night. It filled my car like someone had opened a hatch to a flooded compartment. My hand slipped on the steering wheel. I cracked the window. The smell didn't leave. It got worse. My radio, even turned off, made a sound. A low hum. Then a ping again. Ping. The hum turned into something like a voice underwater. Muffled, bubbling, close. I slammed my palm into the radio like I could kill it. The sound didn't stop. It came from everywhere. From the vents. From the door seams. From the space beneath my seat. Plink, plink, plink. Then, right behind my ear, came that wet whisper. Ma RK. I jerked so hard the car swerved. Horn blared behind me. A truck roared past, driver flipping me off. I didn't care. My heart was exploding. I looked into my passenger side mirror. The shoulder of the road was there, wet grass, rocks, ferns. And beside my car, keeping pace like it had last night, was a shape. Thin, pale, head perfectly still. White circle face turned toward me. Mouth open in that empty smile. My vision tunneled. No, gah. It didn't run. It didn't move its limbs like a normal body. It slid, like the air itself had turned into water for it. I floored the gas. The car surged forward, engine whining. The thing stayed with me, keeping pace, not even trying, like it knew exactly how far I could go. My brain fractured. I started babbling, swearing, pleading at nothing. Get the fuck away from me. What do you want? Leave me alone. The thing's mouth opened wider, and from it came a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. A sonar ping, not from machine, from a throat. Ping. It vibrated through my bones. I screamed again, and this time it sounded like someone else's voice. Like my mouth wasn't mine. The road ahead curved along a cliffside. Guardrail on one side, drop into a river gorge on the other. Not the ocean, but water anyway, white, fast, relentless. The thing's head turned slightly, its first real movement, and angled toward the gorge. Like it could taste the river. Like it knew it had another path. My chest tightened with a horrible realization. It didn't need the bay. It just needed water. Any water. And there is no place on this planet with none. I hit the curve too fast. Tires screeched. The car fishtailed. For a split second, the world tilted and I saw the river below, foaming and hungry. I thought, I'm going to die and it's going to watch. I overcorrected. The car snapped back into the lane so hard my shoulder slammed the door. I kept driving, tears blurring my eyes. The thing was still there. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it dropped back. Not because it couldn't keep up, because it chose to. Its head sank below the window line, just like in my driveway. And I heard that sloshing sound again, deep and hollow, like something filling itself with liquid. The smell in my car intensified for a second, then vanished like someone had opened a window. My radio went dead silent. The dripping stopped. My phone bar stayed up. I drove for another hour before I dared slow down. My hands were cramped into claws around the wheel. I pulled into a busy gas station inland, the kind with bright lights and families, and people who had no idea what the ocean could do. I parked in full view of the building, under a camera, beside other cars like proximity to normal humans could protect me. I got out shaking so hard I could barely stand. The sun was bright. The air was dry compared to the coast. It smelled like hot asphalt and gasoline, not brine. I stood there breathing like I'd run a marathon. A guy at the next pump glanced at me and gave me that polite stranger look. You okay, buddy? Then turned away. Because that's what people do. They don't want to weird. I crouched and looked under my car. Nothing. No pale body. No white face. Just shadows. I wanted to collapse right there on the pavement. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. I wanted to rip my skin off. I went into the convenience store and bought water I didn't need just so I'd have a reason to stand under fluorescent lights for a minute. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked wrong, too wide, too glassy. And for a heartbeat, a single awful heartbeat, the reflection behind me didn't match. My head was still, but my reflection's head tilted slightly, like it was curious. I whipped around so hard my neck cracked. Nobody was there. When I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was normal again, except there was a faint black smear at the corner of my mouth. Like ink, like oil. I scrubbed at it until my skin burned. It didn't fully come off. I left the gas station and kept driving. I didn't stop until I hit a motel in a landlocked town where the air smelled like dust and distant rain instead of salt. I checked in without making eye contact with the clerk. I dragged my bags inside and locked the door, then locked it again. The room felt wrong. Too still, too dry, like my body didn't trust it. I taped the curtains shut anyway. I sat on the bed with my laptop open, trying to work like everything was normal, trying to ground myself in the familiar rhythm of audio waveforms and timeline cuts. I lasted 15 minutes before my hands started shaking again, because the silence in the room wasn't silence. It had that same listening quality my house had at night, like the air was waiting for a sound to answer. At 8:59 p.m., out of habit, my body tensed. There was no siren here, no coastal tower. Still, my breath caught, and my eyes darted to the window. 9 o'clock. Nothing happened. I exhaled. Then the bathroom sink turned on by itself. Just a trickle at first. Water whispered into the basin. My whole body went rigid. No, y whisperat. The trickle became a steady stream. Then the drain gurgled. A deep, hollow gurgle like a throat clearing underwater. The light above the sink flickered, and from the drain came a sound. Soft, wet, unmistakable. A knock. 1, 2, 3. I backed away, so fast I hit the dresser. The knocking repeated. 1, 2, 3. The water in the sink began to darken, not with dirt, but with a black stain that spread like ink in a glass. My stomach lurched. Then, through the running water, a voice bubbled up. Not words, a mimic, a wet imitation of human sound. And it said my name like it had learned it from my own fear. Ma ericappa. I grabbed my keys and ran out of the motel room barefoot. I didn't stop at the front desk. I didn't explain. I didn't even look back. I got in my car and drove until my eyes were burning and the sky was starting to lighten again. I don't know where I am now. Not exactly. Somewhere with more fields than trees. Somewhere people don't smell like fish. But it doesn't matter, because it's not tied to that town the way I thought. It's tied to me. I haven't slept in a bed near plumbing since. I've been living out of my car like a paranoid asshole, showering at gyms in the middle of the day when the sun is high and the water feels less alive. I cover my mirrors at night. I don't drink from cups I can see my reflection in. Sometimes in parking lots, I'll hear a faint ping, just one, coming from somewhere I can't locate, and my whole body locks up. Sometimes I'll wake up with the taste of salt in my mouth, like I've been underwater. And sometimes, when I'm stupid enough to doze off in the driver's seat, I'll jerk awake and see a wet oval smear on my passenger window, like a mouth pressed close, like it's right there, inches away, smiling without teeth. Last week, I pulled into a rest stop near a river. I didn't notice the sign. I was exhausted and my brain was mush, and I just needed to close my eyes for 10 minutes. When I woke up, the sun had dipped low and the air had turned cold. I got out to piss, and the sound of the river hit me. Rushing, constant, hungry. I turned too fast, and my phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the pavement. It skidded under my car. I stared at it for a long second, dread pooling in my gut. Then, because I'm apparently the dumbest man alive, I crouched and leaned down to grab it. Under the car, in the shadow, something pale was curled up like it had been waiting. Its thin body pressed flat to the ground. Its white circle face turned toward me. Black stains where eyes should be. That empty mouth open like a cutout. and it was smiling.